Welcome back to Car-pinionated, our weekly and slightly irreverent talk about cars, the car industry, and driving in general. I'm Doug Stewart, Senior Digital Content Producer for Fox 61 in Hartford. From Chicago, we have Jeff Buchholz, writer and editor at WBBM, who is now on his third round of collecting Matchbox and Hot Wheels cars. And
I
joining
refuse to
us
say I have a problem because it's not a problem.
and joining us from Fairfield County, Connecticut, is Glenn Packman, improv comedian and fellow car enthusiast, who we just determined owned his first car was a car that Carl Sagan also owned, a VW Squareback. So fun stuff, guys. Thanks for joining us. Briefly, I wanted to start talking about a situation that arose in the Midwest specifically, but Chicago, where a bunch of electric car drivers were stranded because of the cold weather and some other issues. And Jeff, you can talk to us a little bit about that.
I have just, in fact, thawed out from that period in Chicago in January. It was really cold here. It was, I think wind chills were 20, 30 below. It hasn't been that cold in Chicago in a while. And as you all know, nothing works the way it's supposed to when it's that cold.
Yes, this
And
is
that
yeah.
that includes electric cars and electric car chargers. And so this was the case in the suburbs where some folks who had electric cars were trying to get them charged, and the charging stations weren't really working. I think even the Tesla supercharger station
Yeah.
that was nearby wasn't really working all that well. And none of this is particularly surprising if you know anything about electric cars. I mean, car batteries function better when they're warmer. And most electric cars have a way for you to preheat batteries. That, of course, takes range out because it takes power to do that. Combine that with the general terrible state of electric car charging infrastructure in the United States, and what you have is a whole lot of people with really expensive bricks hanging out in suburban parking lots, waiting for an opportunity to get any measure of
Mm.
juice into their new electric vehicles. It's one of these things it's sort of the bane of the early adopter, right? Like at some point, we will have better electric car charging infrastructure in the US, I hope. At one point, electric cars will be better equipped to handle really extreme cold. And I think this kind of cold weather that we had during that period is, like I said, something we haven't had in several years and may not have again for a few years. So, I mean, this is a pretty extreme case. But because it was electric cars and everybody likes a villain, all of a sudden it became what it was. It became
Mm.
sort of the feature on lots of national news programs for that reason.
Yeah, and I think the key what you're talking about is the problem with the chargers. That's what I first picked up was a whole bunch of Tesla superchargers that weren't working, which is not the case. That's something you don't often see.
The supercharger network is uniformly really good. It's one of the reasons that Tesla was able to make its particular charging connector the North American charging standard.
Hmm.
I'm speaking in acronyms now, because they are able to, deliver a reliable product. This was, you know, but bad things happen to good networks sometimes,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
that's exactly what happened here.
And what a lot of people also said is like, the adoption of electric cars in Norway is through the roof, right?
Mhm.
And Norway's not a warm country.
No,
you
no.
know, but they haven't ever seen that either. So interesting things. Thanks
Hmm.
for bringing that up.
Hmm.
This week, we wanted to talk about an electric car. Um, a series of electric cars. As most of you know, the General Motors is moving all their electric vehicles to the platform that they call the Ultium platform, which is sort of a skateboard sort of deal. And they can make it longer and wider, and put different things in more batteries or less batteries depending on what and it underlies the Hummer and the Lyric and the Celestiq and the Honda Prologue, interestingly enough, and the Chevy Blazer EV. And there's a couple things that we wanted to talk about here, but let's dive right into it. In that there have been several car journalism organizations that have purchased or started using a Blazer EV, and it has not gone well. The first is Consumer Reports here in Connecticut, who just were up, didn't like the build quality, didn't like the design, didn't like a whole bunch of things about it, and then it goes downhill from there. Right. So, Jeff, you want to talk about what other things are going on with the Blazers?
At least two other organizations, Edmunds is one and Inside EVs is another, where Blazer EVs literally left riders stranded. Notably, the Inside EVs example, the guy was stuck in Appalachia, essentially, on what was supposed to be sort of a couple-hour trip, whatever, from his home in Columbus, became this odyssey where he ended up having to leave the car behind and go back and get it. And what's happening is that it seems to start when the whole center stack kind of goes black, and then all of the instruments go black, and then it starts flashing, shutdown warnings, and there seems to be some issue with charging and body control modules and stuff. It's I think everybody understands that. We've talked about early adoption already in this episode. There are some risks to early adoption, but this is serious enough and is persistent enough that for a time anyway, General Motors had issued a stop sale order on Blazer EVs. One of the things that was the most disconcerting, and I think this was the Edmunds story, was that they sent their car to the dealer, and the dealer was having to bring in a Chevy guy, like a corporate guy, and no one could really figure out what was going wrong with the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
a bad sign.
Yeah, that's not great, Bob. That's not going to work.
Glenn, what do you think about this? What do you think about their current Ultium problems?
From a strictly consumer standpoint, I think the whole idea of buying a new car and having it break down has become almost foreign to us, because new cars have just gotten better and better over the years. I mean, they really have. You buy a car and you can kind of expect it throughout at least the warranty to have very few problems, maybe one or two, and sometimes there's the occasional lemon kind of thing. We are seeing a fair share of electric vehicles with problems. I was a member of a Facebook group for Polestar owners, believe it or not, and I was not impressed with what I was reading. In that there were a lot of quality issues there. I'm not going to bash Polestar or Volvo, but it was a newer car. I think the tough thing about electric cars breaking down is that because it's new technology, we don't have that sense of, I even know how to fix this. I'm not a mechanic in any way, shape, or form, but I know the basics of an internal combustion engine and how gas-powered cars work. I know nothing really about how an electric engine works. It's just, it's a golf cart to me. So I think there's that sort of foreign mentality, and because it's something new, we need to have more more of a feeling of knowing these cars better, to help dispel some of the fear around them. Hearing stories like this is not going to help things. Maybe they're being hyped up a little bit. I've heard of people being abandoned, having to abandon their gas-powered cars somewhere because it's broken down too. But there's just something scarier about new technology leaving you stranded.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that the piece that always bothers me is that so much of what's happening is routed through those screens.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
without that physical, piece of it, that just, it frankly scares me,
Right. Right.
and maybe that's a familiarity. Um, I don't know, but it just really needs to,
Right.
it's a problem.
And there's something really disconcerting about when you have a computer problem where suddenly it just leaves you, something just clicks and it goes wrong, and computers do this, and the answer is, well, reboot it,
Yeah.
that's always the answer, reboot it. I don't know, to this day, I don't know how that fixes things, but it does,
So
it's that,
quick
what?
aside, I was flying from San Francisco back east, and there's a problem on the plane, and they say, well, we're trying to fix it. We have a light that comes on, try to fix it. But the ground crew is telling us to reboot the plane, turn it off and turn it back on again, and we're going to do that. And I thought, well, I'm glad that they're doing it on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than in midair. Yes,
and
yes.
and it ended up fixing the problem. And I posted it on Facebook or something, and one of my flight attendant friends said, it happens more than you think. I'm like, ooh.
Right.
Okay.
You want your brand new electric car that's going to take you and your family wherever to be more reliable than Windows Vista. Like you do. It's just,
Wait, was
yeah.
Windows Vista not reliable?
Mhm. And I was thinking as we were preparing for this episode, the thing that I thought about was diesel engines.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
In the late 70s, mid to late 70s, everybody was panicked because gas prices were soaring. Everybody was looking for a solution. So General Motors, the largest industrial company in the world in that moment, with bags and bags and bags of money, decided that its solution would be to take one of the best engines it was making, the 350 cubic inch Oldsmobile Rocket V8, and convert it to run on diesel power, which would get its owners reasonable miles per gallon, at least in the terms of the late 70s and early 80s. What they failed to account for, of course, is the fact that it made it a completely terrible engine. And I think there's ample evidence of this, basically soured the entire American buying public on diesel engines for anything.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
mean, and at that point, it was, the Rabbit, which was a perfectly fine car as a diesel, though you could time it with a calendar.
Mhm.
The Mercedes diesels, same
Which,
deal.
right.
Um,
But ran as long as
they'll run
many
forever.
calendars. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And the General Motors diesels, which were garbage.
Yeah.
I don't no American car maker has successfully run diesel engines through passenger cars since, I don't believe. With the occasional, I think there might have been a Chevy Cruze diesel for a minute,
Yeah.
but
I think you're right.
I think that was just to fill some kind of cafe requirement. But I don't know that anyone actually bought one. And if you did buy one and you like it, please write to Fox 61, Hartford, Connecticut. Um, if General Motors can't put a lid on this and figure and un-F this thing, it, it could taint the next 10 or 15 years of EV
Yeah.
adoption in this
Right.
country. For every Mach-E and F-150 Lightning that works pretty well. You know, you've got Chevrolet that can't do it, or you know, you buy a $115,000 GMC truck and somehow that gets bricked.
Yeah.
That's a problem. That's going to be a
Yeah, it's a
problem, and it's
huge
going to be a
problem.
bigger problem than General Motors. It's going to be the thing that takes down Mary Barra, and it's going to be a bigger problem than just for General Motors. It's going to be a
Mhm.
problem for the U.S. energy strategy.
Yeah, I absolutely think you're right. And good on Ford for, you know, and the other manufacturers for doing a decent job with it. It's hard. It doesn't, it's like learning everything over again
Mhm.
to get it right. And and then it just kind of shows like the learning curve that we didn't see from Tesla, right? We didn't see, I mean, sure, Tesla has quality issues and things like that, but those cars are out there and they're not doing that same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah,
But I mean, we didn't see that because Tesla was practicing on the Roadster, which
right.
nobody. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
that's probably still heading into deep space as far as I know. But you're right. I mean, they have figured out how to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
building cars is hard,
Yep.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And every time, something like this happens, you're sort of reminded of why that is. And even a company with the not as vast as it once was, but still pretty impressive resources of General Motors can't figure this out.
And
Mhm.
that flummoxes me.
Yeah.
That just like, why? You can hire whoever you want. You can do whatever, it's like, it just feels like, why is that? Why is that a problem? When
I
you have a stop sale order on these cars.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is GM we're talking about, and they did put out the
Uh,
Vega.
yeah, yeah.
Think about
But
that for a moment.
so no, well, hang on here. By the time, and this is the GM pattern. We've talked about it, I think, in this podcast before, and I'm worried that we're here again. The Vega was actually a pretty decent car by
Yeah,
1977 when they dropped it.
Right,
The
right.
Pontiac Fiero, a dynamite little car by 1989 when they dropped it.
right,
The
right,
Cadillac Cimarron, okay, it wasn't a great Cadillac, but it was a damn fine Cavalier in 1988 when they dropped it.
dropped it.
Right,
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 right.
Here's where
right.
we are. The customer, by the time 1985 or 6 rolled around, the Chevy Citation was a pretty good car. And
Right.
ended up being the foundation for the Celebrity and the Lumina and all of the cars that
Yep,
came along with that, right?
yep,
But
Right.
yep.
it had been so ruined, even
Mhm.
back to the Corvair, the 67, 68 Corvair,
Mhm.
a fine handling car, and I would venture to say one of the top 5 best looking cars from General Motors in that
Mhm.
period. But it had already been so tainted by customers being the beta testers for the first 3 years
Right.
Right.
that
Yeah.
it was done.
Yeah.
Right.
And
There is
I fear that we're on our way here.
Yeah.
some video film of an Electrovare where there was an electric Corvair.
Yes, the
Yeah,
van, yeah.
yeah. No, it was a
Oh, the
sedan.
sedan? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. I think it was the Electrovare. I'm not sure that
That's
naming
a
need to be
total
worked on, but yeah.
that's totally an Ed Cole thing. Ed Cole,
Yeah.
when he was head of GM or Chevrolet at the time, was all about engineering. That Corvair would never have happened if it hadn't been for him. He
Yeah.
was always thinking outside the box and thinking, how can we do this differently? How can we do it better? And that makes total sense for him.
Yeah.
My
That's interesting.
my grandfather had at least 2 of them.
Hmm?
The first-ish generation. I don't think it was
Mhm.
the very early one, but the both generations he had one of each.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was hoping that we were beyond the point where we're making the customers do the final, the last mile testing for us.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
Well,
GM got a GM, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And a company that does that more than GM is Tesla, which, you know, all their customers are basically beta testers,
Yes.
which, you
Yeah, and they're beta testing things like full self-driving, which is not full self-driving, friends. It just really
yeah,
isn't.
yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I mean, that's equally scary, honestly. But yeah, and and you're right, when you're in this kind of new era where cars, the way a car runs and puts power to the pavement is less accessible than ever.
Mm.
I mean, Doug, you're as technologically savvy as anyone I've ever known in my life. And, you know, if we're befuddled by this stuff, then, you know, what hope does anyone else have?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, the cat.
Um,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it begs the question of like a manufacturer that's known for putting out a great car in year one, Honda, and they're going to be taking this platform and doing the prologue. So I really wonder what's going to happen there.
Yeah,
Because
which is, yes,
I
a
like the
very good
styling of
point.
the prologue way better than these other cars we're talking
Yeah.
about. But yeah, it just
I don't know how I
makes
feel
me
about the
wonder.
lowercase font on the badge.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that's an odd choice,
it is.
but yeah, I think if I'm Honda, I'm watching this very closely and
Yaha.
with some concern.
Which I thought I saw that this is not a collaboration that is ongoing, that they've kind of called an end to it, which is interesting as what makes that what then, you know, the prologue becomes this orphan, you
Yes.
know.
I
And
do
from
think
Honda's point, they need somebody, you know, they're on their own. They need somebody who help them with this process, you know, and you know, they're not going to be able, really not going to turn to Toyota, you know.
no, I thought that my sense was that this was a stopgap, that this was, we're
Yeah.
going to do this just so we can get an EV on the road, and
Right.
then it'll give us time to develop our own platform.
Yeah.
Right.
The what was there is Suzu.
Passport.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first Passport was in Isuzu. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
rebadged. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
the Acura RLX was a Isuzu Trooper also.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
But
Both of them.
Honda
Yep.
also sold V6 engines to Saturn. Like this is an arrangement that has, you know,
Sure.
has gone through a couple of generations here where
Yeah.
they've done tie-ups before. What would make great sense is for Honda to team up with BMW, although BMW and Toyota are tied up
Yeah.
for the Supra. But
Right. And and that happened because they wanted to more know about the Mirai, which is a totally other
Yes. Yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah. But all right. The one thing I wanted to add to this is that Cadillac is actually, according to a story in the Detroit Free Press last month, Cadillac is looking to push out more of their lyrics, and then they still have the Escalade EV that's on the, you know, on the short list. So they're looking to open more new dealers. Good for them. They're going to focus on areas that have money, which makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if, you know, there's a use for Cadillac dealership in rural Utah. Nothing against the Utahians. But you know, that's
The term is Utahns. Doug.
Utahns. Okay. So thank you. Thank you. But so, you know, and like I said, you know, I wish everyone luck, but I really hope that GM can figure this out and fast, you
Well,
know.
they need to. Kind of their
Yeah.
future depends on it. I mean,
Yeah.
if they've staked out Cadillac as a high-tech company, and I think Buick's supposed to go all EV here in the next 10 years, to the point where General Motors has agreed to buy out half the Buick dealers in America that don't want to go through this sort of whatever. They gotta, it's a problem.
Yeah. So. All right. Anything else to add on these fine topics?
I've seen 2 lyrics in traffic in the last week, and they're nice. I like them a lot.
Mm-hmm. I think they are a very nice looking car. Yeah.
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 Agreed.
They're
Okay.
apparently like got great deals on them right now. Like, okay, well,
Okay.
yeah, fine. So, all right, that's gonna bring us to an end of another episode of Car-pinionated. I really appreciate you guys. This is a lot of fun. I enjoy doing this. We're getting good feedback from people who I don't even know.
Hey, that's always a good thing.
Yeah. So it's great. And that's another episode of Car-pinionated. If you have any questions, concerns, problems, things you want us to talk about, please contact us at dstewart@fox61.com. That's me. And that will be and like and subscribe on YouTube. We have plenty more on the playlist that you can get to when you go to Car-pinionated. All right, gentlemen, we're done. And thank you, and everyone, good night.
Good night.